Women of Wyoming Then and Now is brought to you by the Wyoming Historical Society and supported in part by a grant from the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, a program of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. This program features unique female perspectives on events, themes, or narratives related to state history. We, the host, believe that one woman's action toward a better future can result in a greater legacy that inspires and equips many generations of women to come. Welcome everyone, I am Janelle Maloney, today's host of Women of Wyoming Then and Now. This is a program brought to you by the Wyoming State Historical Society. And joining in as a co-host today are Leslie Wagoner and Sylvia Bruner. Leslie, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I have been the president of the Historical Society, actually not a very long time, since September of 2020. And my everyday job is as a faculty archivist at the American Heritage Center at the University of Wyoming.
Thank you very much. And we also have Sylvia Bruner here. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Sylvia Bruner, and I work in Buffalo, Wyoming. I'm currently affiliated with the Johnson County Historical Society, so a local chapter. And I have served on the state board. I don't remember exactly what my years of service were, but they were very enjoyable. And I recommend the State Society to everybody I can think of because it was a really good experience for me. A lot of great people, great examples of how an organization can really be efficient and professional. And it's like my ruler for every other board that I've ever served on of how efficient they are. They're always being compared to the Wyoming State Historical Society. And Linda has been a huge part of that. So I'm very excited.
So with us now is our special guest, Linda Fabian. Welcome, Linda.
You.
So Linda, go ahead and introduce yourself really quickly, explain your role and your background before we go into our questions.
I'm a native Wyomingite. After high school, I went to Washington, D.C. to work. And when I came back to Wyoming, I was lucky enough to work for the Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources, different title at that time. Worked there for 20 years, and that's where I became involved with the Wyoming State Historical Society. I've served as secretary and president, and I've been the executive secretary of the society, the only paid staff person, since 2007.
That's a very long time. Thank you so much for helping us out to preserve our Wyoming history in such a consistent manner. For those who don't know, Linda is a co-author of a book, nonfiction book titled A History of the Wyoming Capital, which she co-authored with Starlee Tabbitt in 2019.
Well, not to brag, but there's two others. My lifelong best friend and I in Douglas co-authored a book about the history of Douglas. And then Starlee and I also co-authored a book about the history of Cheyenne Frontier Days.
Well, I think we're all really excited to hear some of the important ways that you have contributed to Wyoming's history in the current time, but also being able to see how you've been able to work through the preservation of Wyoming's history in the past as well. So we already think that the things that you've done, Linda, are so impactful to other women that it will be appreciated for generations to come. So for our listeners today, can you tell us again about something that you've done that will impact future perspectives on Wyoming's history, especially for women?
I'm at a loss for words. It's very challenging because I don't see myself in that way. Honestly, I really don't know how to answer that question. What I try to do, my own moral, for my own work ethic and that kind of thing, I try to set an example for everybody, not just women or young women. And I see myself in this position as kind of the hub of a bigger wheel. And I take a great deal of joy in connecting people and helping people try to figure out where they need to go for the help that they are asking. I don't know. That's a hard question.
Well, I think what you do is very important as a family historian and a genealogist. For when I've pulled on every single thread I can possibly grab onto, and I don't know the specific local history, I can reach out to Linda and she can tease out those details or the context that I'm missing. So I appreciate your greater knowledge and access. You know how to get the details that family historians and genealogists might not be able to do from afar. So thanks.
Well, it's been a very satisfying opportunity for me since 1980 when I joined the State Department and worked there for 20 years. That's where I really learned and learned about the value of history and learned how to love it. I didn't really learn that in school. And that's also where I became acquainted with many people all over the state of Wyoming. For many years, I was either the co-state history day coordinator or the state history day coordinator. And again, it offered me that opportunity to meet people from all across Wyoming. I always felt that if I ever got in trouble on my travels, I'd have somebody anywhere that I could call. And so I was able to bring that to the Historical Society. I don't know how to express what impact that has had, especially on women. It's complimentary to think that that has had an impact.
Yeah, you make people feel welcome. Sometimes being a young person in a history field can be a little intimidating because you're dealing with people who, through no fault of yours or theirs, already have amassed their own knowledge base. And sometimes you don't feel terribly welcomed, but you're the opposite of that all-inclusive, let me connect you to the right people, let me show you this, teach you that. I think that's incredibly helpful for young people wanting to get into any kind of history-related field. Like your excitement is contagious.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think it's really important to not be afraid to ask questions. And I think that's one of the things that has expanded my knowledge of not only Wyoming history, but of also who is doing what. I don't have a college education, but I have been incredibly fortunate to be around wonderful people who have gone to college and really have learned history. But it's just been such a blessing to be exposed to those kinds of people who have treated me as an equal. And I've really appreciated that.
I just wanted to add, I think along the lines of what Sylvia said, I think Linda, as a woman, brings something to the role. And what I mean by that is I think women are naturally very social and relational. And Linda is certainly that way. And Linda has a lot of personal charm. I just feel like that goes a long way to helping people, like Sylvia said, to feel welcome, not in whatever capacity, whether they're officers on the executive committee, whether they're members, new members. She has that great womanly touch. Sorry, men out there, but I think there's something to be said about that touch that Linda has. That's very feminine and gracious and charming.
I have to add another layer to that. So for me, as a relatively new history buff, I only know a little bit about a little bit. And so I'm competing or working. My colleagues are experts and they've been studying everything for so long and they have 10 books published. And so for me to look at you and say, oh, my love of history is enough. And that's exciting and it provides opportunities. And I hope that that message gets passed along to the youth that are able to watch this is you don't have to be an expert right now, but your love will take you on that journey to becoming an expert. So you've shown that to me and I appreciate it.
I am curious, Linda, with your job at the state and then working into the Historical Society, were you the first female to hold that kind of position within the state office?
I was the Chief Public Information Officer for what was called Archives, Museums, and Historical Department. And again, you know, that opportunity came to me not because I had a college education, it required a degree, but my experience just allowed me to do it. So no, I was not the first woman. I might have been the second or the third woman to hold that position. And I'm only the second paid staff employee for the State Historical Society.
So let's go ahead and check out another detail about Ms. Linda Fabian. So Linda, we think it is very important to remind our listeners that our own past informs our present. So can you elaborate on the background, culture, or context that inspired you, or maybe it required you to pursue the actions you took? Now, I know you mentioned that you didn't feel there was much of a value placed on history in school. So where did that lead you, and how did you become who you are today?
Well, having grown up in Douglas, I was very intrigued and touched by my personal family history. My grandpa and grandma homesteaded to Douglas, and we still have that homestead in our family. And my dad was born in Douglas, and I think that probably he inspired me to know more about family history and to learn to love our community. My mom and dad were both very socially active in the community, but I think the depth from where you learn to love your own personal family history probably came from my dad. My mom didn't like to talk too much about her growing up years or her background, but out of the four children, I think I was the lucky one that got to feel that love for our land and our homestead and the pride that my dad had in it. And so, I don't know, as I grew, I think that I hope I'm able to pass that along to people and help them understand the value of local community and family history.
I think you will, Linda. I do. So even though you mentioned starting just with family history, which I think a lot of people will enter. It's like the gateway to beginning to explore area or regional history. So sometimes those things might seem small or not as impactful right now. And those actions are not quite realized or appreciated until much later. I often hear that there's just one genealogist or one historian per family, and the rest just let it all go and don't preserve. Or maybe expect someone to keep a scrapbook, and the other one is just like, oh, well, she's got scrapbooks, ask her. So starting with the family history, but then growing into that community history, how do you hope that your contributions will ultimately be interpreted or even realized as in the future? Or in other words, what's the legacy that you want to be part of?
I kind of have a motto, and honestly, I learned this from being the State History Day coordinator and working with children in schools who had to follow the rules and develop conclusions for whatever it was topic that they were working on. And so I have learned how to ask myself, so what? What does it matter? And I think that as an individual, when we ask ourselves about our actions, you know, what we're doing, we have to find out, so what? What is this going to mean to anybody else but you? What conclusion can you draw from this? And those kind of critical thinking skills didn't really come to me until much later. And so I've really tried to learn how to use that when I'm promoting the Wyoming Historical Society or representing the Wyoming Historical Society, I think I have to help people understand why is it so valuable and so important. Now, what does it mean to you? What's it mean to me? So what? Well, it's a big so what.
But you're right, Linda. Our little drops do add up in that bigger bucket. And it seems like the more we know about those individual family connections and even the local histories, we are creating or recreating that web so that we can understand our world at a bigger level. So our individual perspectives do matter, and our individual stories and our histories do matter and will matter. So I'm super excited that you have been hoping for that and anticipating that as part of your legacy. Your story matters, and the way that you inspire others to get in there and explore their own history matters.
Well, somehow I've been able to develop, it's not a talent, what would it be? I've been able to develop something within me that lets me look at a group of people and say, oh, that's Leslie Wagner. I want to hang my hat with her. And look at that Sylvia Bruner. She's the director of a museum and she has twins and Ben and donkeys and mules. And she loves snakes. I want to hang my hat with her. And Janelle, you're so young and fresh. You make us all want to jump in.
I realize you have a lot of memories through the years, but is there something, a trek or a annual meeting for the Historical Society, something that you want to bring up that just really comes to mind right now?
One of my most honored opportunities was when I became president of the society during its 50th anniversary. And we published a book, and I just have had such great mentors. Dr. David Kathka, he just is that kind of a person that lets you grow and let you make mistakes, but then he's always there to pick you up. Phil Roberts, Rick Ewig, I've just had such wonderful mentors. And being in this position is such an honor. And I get to know people from all over the United States.
Now more than ever, Linda, we in general can access a wealth of historical data and stories from women who came before us. But unless we actively engage in preserving those voices, yours included, and the memories, the photographs, we actually run the risk of losing those meaningful female representations and even losing those very meaningful connections to the community and to our roots. So in one or two thoughts, could you share some encouragement or advice for others who might want to preserve or even correct, maybe stuff is wrong, or explore their own personal, local, or ancestral history?
I would advise women of all ages to always take stock in what's going on around them and try to discover where you want to be. And then if you can see down the road where you want to be, suddenly there will be steps in place to help you get there. And that applies to learning and appreciating family history and your own personal history. And I think that way you encourage other women, young women and older women alike, to do the same thing.
I like that point. I think it's a good one. Just one more question. Linda, you have such a huge dance background, ballroom dance, correct?
I saw that. I Googled you, Linda. I saw that.
I had never got the chance to see you and Joe dance, and I just really am sorry I never saw that. But is there anything that you bring from that past into what you do now?
Practice makes perfect. And keep going, because if you stop, then you lose everything.
Better well, keep going.
Exactly, keep going.
I'm curious, because you have written multiple texts and contributed in multiple areas about the local history, have you ever had to maybe rewrite. So you discover something, you publish it, and then you learn later, oh, but there was more, or oh, that detail needs to be corrected. Have you learned in that practice makes perfect and just keep going way that even in your historical research, it's okay if you make that mistake. It doesn't have to be perfect right now because we have an opportunity to continue learning and growing and providing more.
Right. And I don't think that you can necessarily always go back and correct it, but you can remember that experience the next time you step out of your comfort zone.
For sure. So that's all we have time for in today's interview, but we are certain, Linda, there is so much more to be learned from your experience. We are delighted to have the opportunity to pass these and other types of stories like this down to others who may have questions and want to look further into their own lives or into the lives of those in their personal past. So thank you everyone for joining us today for Women of Wyoming Then and Now. Bye-bye.